Cowboy watched her turned away from the store, whispered, "Come with me, I'll fill your table." Clara had lived in the small plains town all her life. It was a quiet place, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and where opportunities were few and far between. She had grown up in a modest cabin with her little brother Sam. Their parents had passed away when Clara was very young, leaving her to care for Sam and herself. Life had never been easy, but Clara had learned to survive on little. She washed clothes for the neighbors, helped with farm chores, and sometimes ran errands for the local store. It was hard work, but she had no choice. Every morning she woke before the sun, rubbing sleep from her eyes and preparing what little breakfast they could manage. Sam was still young and depended on her entirely. She tried to make each morning cheerful for him, telling stories or singing softly as he ate his small meal. On one cold morning in late autumn, Clara bundled herself and Sam in worn coats and stepped out of the cabin. The wind bit at her face as she walked the dirt road to the general store. She held a few coins tightly in her hand, hoping there would be enough to buy bread and some vegetables. The town had been through hard times. Prices were rising, and not everyone could afford the basics. Clara had carefully saved every coin she could, skipping small things for herself just so Sam could have something to eat. She entered the store with a quiet step, hoping no one would notice how little she had. The general store was small but well stocked. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars, tins, and bundles of goods. The smell of flour and fresh coffee filled the air. Clara looked at the shelves carefully, her eyes scanning for the essentials. She counted her coins in her hand, making sure she would not take more than she could pay for. As she approached the counter, the storekeeper, a tall man with a gruff voice named Mr. Harlan, barely looked at her. He was busy talking to another customer, stacking goods on the counter. Clara stepped forward and quietly asked for a loaf of bread and some vegetables. She held out her coins, hoping he would take them without complaint. But Mr. Harlan frowned. "You again, Clara?" he said sharply. "You still haven't paid last time. I can't let you take more now." Clara's stomach sank. She tried to explain that she had saved enough this time, that she had counted carefully. But Mr. Harlan shook his head. "I'm sorry, girl, but rules are rules. No coins, no goods." Clara felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had been turned away in front of a few other customers, some of whom whispered quietly among themselves. She nodded politely, trying not to cry, and turned toward the door. She clutched her small bundle of coins, feeling the weight of hunger and disappointment. As she stepped outside, she kept her head down, hoping no one would see the tears forming in her eyes. Sam tugged gently at her coat. "Clara, are we going home?" he asked softly. She forced a smile and nodded, even though her heart ached. They walked in silence down the road, the wind pushing against them. Clara's mind raced with thoughts of how she would make the coins stretch until the next day, or the next week. She worried about Sam and whether he had eaten enough. She worried about herself, about how hard it was to survive in a town that didn't always care. The leaves blew across the road, swirling around their feet, and Clara felt a quiet loneliness settle over her. She had learned to hide her emotions, but the sting of rejection from the store was hard to shake. As they passed the edge of the town square, Clara noticed a group of children playing near the fountain. Their laughter was light and carefree, and for a moment she envied them. She remembered when she and Sam had played without a care before their parents had passed. Now, play was a luxury they could not afford. Responsibility weighed heavily on her young shoulders. But she had never complained. She had accepted that life was hard, and that she must face it with courage. Still, Moments like this, when the world seemed unfair, made her heart ache. Clara decided to rest for a moment on the wooden steps of the town hall. Sam sat beside her, kicking at a small stone. She watched the town wake around her, the blacksmith striking his hammer, the baker setting out fresh loaves, the postman riding slowly through the streets. Life went on for everyone else, but for her, it felt as though the world had pressed a heavy hand upon her. She looked down at her coins, wishing they could buy more than bread and vegetables, wishing she had someone who understood the quiet desperation she felt each day. It was then that she noticed someone on horseback at the edge of the square. A tall man dressed in worn but clean clothes watched the scene with interest. He seemed calm and steady, his horse shifting its weight as he leaned slightly forward. Clara didn't pay much attention at first. She was used to strangers passing through town, but something about the way he looked at her made her pause. There was no judgment in his gaze, no impatience. Instead, there was a quiet curiosity, almost like he understood the small struggles that life had placed before her. Clara felt a mixture of relief and wariness. She had learned long ago not to trust strangers too quickly. Many people offered help with hidden motives, expecting something in return. But this man seemed different. He stayed back, not rushing toward her, not demanding attention. Instead, he simply watched, as if he were waiting for the right moment to speak. Clara shifted slightly, feeling a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there were still kind people in the world. The wind blew again, carrying the scent of the nearby fields and the faint smell of hay from the barns. Clara shivered slightly and pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. She glanced at Sam, who was watching the horse and its rider with wide, curious eyes. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have someone notice her efforts, someone who would offer help without asking for anything in return. It was a thought she had not entertained in a long time. As she rose to continue walking home, Clara felt a gentle nudge of courage. She had faced hard days before, and she would face many more. But there was something comforting about the steady presence of the cowboy on horseback, watching without judgment. She didn't know it yet, but this small moment, this quiet attention from someone who cared, would be the beginning of a change she had never expected. For the first time that day, Clara lifted her chin and walked a little taller, carrying her coins not just as money but as a symbol of her resilience. By the time she reached the outskirts of town, Clara and Sam had settled into their familiar routine once more. The cabin, small and simple, waited for them with its thin walls and creaking floorboards. Inside, the hearth was cold, but she would soon light a fire and prepare what little they had. The day had been hard, and yet, amid the struggle, a tiny spark of hope had begun to flicker. Clara had been turned away from the store, dismissed and overlooked, but she had also been seen, even if only from a distance. And sometimes, that quiet recognition was enough to keep a person moving forward. As night fell over the plains, Clara tucked Sam into bed, telling him a story of heroes who faced impossible odds yet never gave up. She spoke softly, her voice steady despite the weariness in her body. She thought about the man on horseback, still lingering in her memory, and wondered who he was. She didn't know it yet, but he would soon become an important part of her story. Someone who would offer a kindness she had almost forgotten existed. For now, though, she held her brother close and let the warmth of their small cabin remind her that even in hard times there was room for hope. And so, the first day of a new chapter ended quietly, with Clara sitting by the hearth, counting her coins once more, but also counting the small moments of courage that had carried her through. She had been turned away, yes, but she had also been seen, and sometimes that was the first step toward a better life. The next morning, Clara woke early as usual. The sky was still a pale shade of gray, and the wind carried the first hints of winter. She dressed Sam in his worn coat and shoes, making sure he was warm before she stepped outside. The chores never ended, and even small tasks could take up most of the day. Clara gathered water from the well, fed the small chickens they kept, and prepared a simple breakfast of porridge. As she worked, her mind wandered to the day before, and the man she had noticed in the town square. She wondered who he was and why he had watched her with such calm attention. There was no reason to hope for anything more, she thought. People like her didn't often get noticed for kindness. After breakfast, Clara decided to visit the store again, hoping to make a small purchase with her saved coins. She and Sam walked down the dirt road, the cold air filling their lungs. The town was slowly waking up. Shop doors creaked open, and the baker carried trays of bread to display in the window. Clara tried to hold her head high, but the memory of being turned away yesterday made her stomach twist. She wanted to buy food, just enough for the next few days, and perhaps some treats for Sam if there was enough. As they approached the store, Clara saw the man again. He was still on horseback, leaning lightly against the fence, watching the town as if he belonged to the wind and open fields rather than the dusty streets. He wore a simple hat, tilted slightly forward, and a jacket that had clearly seen many seasons. But there was something in his posture, in the quiet strength of his stance, that made him seem trustworthy. Clara felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he wasn't here to mock or judge. Perhaps, somehow, he might understand. They entered the store, and Clara quietly counted her coins again. She stepped to the counter and greeted Mr. Harlan politely. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, hoping he would remember that she had paid last time. "I have enough today for a loaf of bread and some vegetables." Mr. Harlan looked at her with suspicion. "Let's see," he muttered, counting the coins. After a long moment, he sighed. "Fine. But don't let it happen again, Clara." Clara nodded, relief washing over her. She carefully selected a fresh loaf of bread, some root vegetables, and a small piece of cheese. Sam's eyes lit up at the sight of the bread, and she felt a warmth in her chest as she realized she could give him a proper meal for the first time in days. They paid the coins and stepped outside. The man on horseback was still there, watching them, though he now seemed closer, as if waiting for them to notice. Clara hesitated, unsure why her heart beat faster at the sight of a stranger. He tipped his hat and offered a small smile. "Good morning," he said in a voice that was calm and steady. "I saw you yesterday. I hope the store treated you better today." Clara felt her cheeks flush. She wasn't used to strangers speaking kindly to her, digging her and driving her and driving her and driving town. Most people either ignored her or treated her as if she didn't belong. But this man, Luke, as he would later introduce himself, spoke without judgment. There was no pity, no expectation, only a quiet understanding. "Yes, sir," Clara replied softly. "I managed today." Luke nodded, his eyes scanning the small coins in her hand. He noticed how carefully she counted them, how every coin had meaning. Every penny represented effort and sacrifice. "You're careful with what you have," he said. "That's good. It's rare these days." Clara felt a small spark of pride. She wasn't used to being complimented. Usually her hard work went unnoticed. "I have to be," she said simply. "My brother depends on me." Luke's expression softened. He seemed to understand the weight she carried. "I can see that," he said quietly. "It's not easy, but you're strong." For a moment, Clara didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her strong before. At least, not without adding a hint of criticism or expectation. She simply nodded, her grip tightening around the small bundle of bread and vegetables. Sam tugged at her sleeve, reminding her of his presence, and she smiled down at him. "Come on, Sam," she said, taking his hand. "Let's get home before it gets colder." Luke watched them for a moment longer. Then, without a word, he turned his horse and began to follow at a distance. Clara didn't notice at first. She was focused on keeping Sam warm and making sure the bread didn't get squashed in the bag. But Luke wasn't rushing, and he didn't approach them directly. Instead, he kept a steady pace, as if he were simply traveling the same road. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, Luke was close enough that Clara noticed him. He dismounted and approached slowly, keeping his hands visible so as not to startle her. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said gently. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right after yesterday." Clara hesitated. He wasn't sure how to respond. Part of her wanted to turn and walk away, to retreat into the safety of routine and solitude. But another part, a small part she hadn't felt in years, wanted to see where this stranger's kindness might lead. "Thank you," she said softly. "We're all right." Luke nodded. "I can see that. But it's not easy, is it? Living like this, struggling day to day?" Clara shook her head. "No, it's not easy. But we manage." She glanced at Sam, who looked up at Luke with wide, curious eyes. "We have to," she added. Luke studied her for a moment, then offered a small, almost shy smile. "I know a place," he said. "I have a ranch not far from here. Plenty of food and a warm place to stay. I could help, if you'll let me." Clara froze. Her mind raced with questions. Why would a stranger offer such kindness? What did he expect in return? How could she trust him when people in town had judged her harshly for so little? Yet, as she looked into Luke's eyes, she sensed sincerity. There was no pressure, no expectation, only a quiet offer. She glanced at Sam, who seemed curious but unafraid. He trusted her judgment, and Clara realized she wanted to protect him from hunger and hardship. The idea of having food, warmth, and safety for even a little while seemed like a dream. She took a deep breath, weighing pride against necessity. Finally, she nodded. We can come with you," she said cautiously. Luke's face lit up with a gentle smile. "Good," he said. "It's not far. We'll be there before the sun climbs too high." They set off together, Clara walking beside Sam while Luke led the horse at a calm pace. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened into wide plains, golden fields stretching to the horizon. Clara felt a strange sense of relief. The open space made her feel lighter, freer, as though the weight of the town's judgment and hardships was slowly falling away. Along the way, Luke talked about the ranch, about the animals, the work, and the life he led. He spoke without boasting, simply sharing his world. Clara listened, fascinated by the freedom and simplicity of his life. She imagined Sam running through fields, laughing without worry, and her heart lifted a little. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life that wasn't just about survival. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had risen higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the fields. The barn stood tall and sturdy, the smell of hay and animals filling the air. Clara felt a small thrill of hope. This place was real, and it promised something she hadn't dared to believe in for a long time: safety, warmth, and a chance to breathe. Luke led them inside the house, where the smell of freshly baked bread filled the room. Clara's eyes widened, and even Sam let out a small gasp. Luke smiled quietly, motioning for them to sit. "Rest," he said. "We'll have a proper meal soon. You've earned it just by getting here safely." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She had worked so hard, endured so much, and now, here was a man offering kindness without question. She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, feeling gratitude swell in her chest. As they waited for the meal, Luke and Clara spoke quietly. He asked about her life, her struggles, and Sam. She found herself sharing more than she had with anyone in years. Luke listened without judgment, nodding and asking gentle questions. Clara felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. By the time the meal was ready, Clara realized something she hadn't expected. This stranger, this cowboy, who had simply offered help, had given her more than food. He had given her hope. And as she and Sam ate together, surrounded by the warmth of the house and the quiet strength of Luke's presence, she felt something shift inside her. Perhaps life could be better. Perhaps kindness still existed in the world. And for the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to hope. The days following Clara and Sam's arrival at the ranch passed slowly, yet each one carried a quiet sense of comfort they had not known before. Clara woke early as usual, but now the cold mornings felt less harsh. The cabin at the ranch was modest but warm, with thick blankets and a hearth that glowed with steady warmth. For the first time, she could make breakfast for Sam without worrying if it would be enough, and the smell of fresh bread and hot porridge filled the air. She watched Sam's eyes light up as he ate, and she felt a lightness in her chest that she had almost forgotten. Luke continued his quiet presence around the ranch. He did not rush her or demand anything, but he made sure she had what she needed. He taught her small chores that made life on the ranch easier: how to feed the chickens properly, care for the horses, and even mend simple tools. Clara was a quick learner, and soon she felt a sense of pride in her ability to contribute. Every evening, Luke would check in on her and Sam, asking how their day had gone. There was no rush, no expectation, only a steady kindness that slowly began to ease the tension Clara had carried for so long. Clara noticed that Sam had grown more confident as well. He explored the fields cautiously at first, peeking into the barn and stepping carefully around the animals. But soon he began running across the wide open spaces, laughing with a freedom Clara had never seen in him before. Watching him, Clara felt a protective warmth and a growing gratitude toward Luke, the cowboy who had offered them a safe place when the world outside seemed so cruel. Despite the calm and safety of the ranch, Clara could not completely escape the memories of hardship she had faced in town. She remembered the harsh words of the storekeeper, the judgmental stares of strangers, and the cold, lonely nights when hunger gnawed at their small cabin. These memories sometimes returned unexpectedly, and Clara found herself feeling cautious and unsure, even in the comforting presence of Luke. She was not used to kindness without strings attached. Yet each day at the ranch helped her trust grow, slowly but steadily. One morning, as Clara carried a basket of eggs from the chicken coop, Luke approached her with a gentle smile. "How are you settling in?" he asked. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him. "It's different, but good," she admitted. "I never imagined a place could feel so safe." Luke nodded. "It should. You and Sam deserve that safety." He paused, as if considering his words carefully. "It's not just about providing food or shelter. You both deserve to feel respected, valued, and at home. That's why I wanted to help." Clara felt a warmth in her chest she could not describe. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Most people judged her for what she didn't have, what she couldn't give, or what she had lost. But Luke's words carried no judgment, only recognition of her strength and her perseverance. She looked down, unsure how to respond, but her heart swelled with gratitude. As the days passed, Clara began to notice small, comforting routines forming. Luke would rise before dawn to tend to the animals, and she would follow soon after to help where she could. The chores were hard, and some days Clara felt her muscles ache, but the work had a rhythm that brought a sense of purpose. She took pride in the small victories, the first successful feeding of the calves, the neat rows of vegetables in the garden, the repaired fence that held the chickens safely inside the coop. Each success reminded her that she was capable, that she could provide for Sam, and that her efforts mattered. One afternoon, Luke invited Clara to help with a task she had never imagined she could do, riding one of the horses. At first, she hesitated, feeling uncertain and afraid. She had never ridden a horse before, and the idea of controlling such a large animal made her nervous. But Luke's patient instruction and calm presence encouraged her to try. Slowly, she mounted the horse, feeling the animal shift beneath her. Luke guided her gently, teaching her to sit tall and hold the reins correctly. Clara felt a thrill of excitement and fear mingling together. She realized she was capable of more than she had believed, and for the first time she felt a deep connection to the land and the animals around her. Sam watched with wide eyes from the fence, cheering as Clara rode past him. Her laughter echoed across the fields, a sound she had not heard from herself in years. The joy in her heart was nearly overwhelming. Luke smiled from beside her, and for a brief moment it felt as if the past hardships had been washed away by this new, unexpected life. Clara realized that the kindness he had offered was not a simple gesture. It was an invitation to heal, to grow, and to believe in herself again. Evenings at the ranch brought a sense of peace. Clara would prepare simple meals with the fresh ingredients from the garden and pantry, and they would all eat together around the wooden table. Luke never rushed her, never made her feel small or inadequate. He shared stories from his own life, tales of long days on the plains, of hard work, and of people who had helped him when he needed it most. Clara listened, fascinated, and felt a connection forming. She realized that kindness was not just about providing food or shelter. It was about seeing people, respecting them, and giving them the dignity that had been denied so often in their lives. One day, as they were working in the garden, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. The sky darkened, and wind whipped through the fields, rattling the barn doors. Clara felt a pang of worry for Sam, who ran to her side, shivering. Luke quickly guided them to the shelter of the barn, and they huddled together as the rain pelted the roof. Despite the storm, Clara felt safe. She realized that safety was not just about walls and roofs. It was about the people who cared enough to stand beside you during the storm, literally and figuratively. Luke's calm presence reassured her, and she felt a growing trust that she had never known before. As the storm passed, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the wet fields. Clara looked out at the horizon and felt a deep sense of hope. She realized that life on the ranch was more than survival. It was about growth, healing, and the possibility of new beginnings. Luke had offered them not just food and shelter, but the chance to rebuild their lives, to find joy and security in a way Clara had never dared to imagine. That evening, as Clara tucked Sam into bed, she thought about the journey they had taken. From the small, cold cabin in town to the warm, welcoming ranch, she realized how much she had changed in just a few days. She felt stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing the challenges ahead. She had learned that kindness could come from unexpected places, and that trusting someone could bring not just safety, but a sense of belonging. Clara also noticed her feelings toward Luke beginning to grow. There was a quiet admiration, a respect for his patience, strength, and gentle nature. But more than anything, she felt gratitude for his unwavering kindness, for the safety he had provided, and for the opportunity to show Sam a life that was not defined by fear or hunger. She knew that her trust had been hard-earned, and she vowed to protect it and nurture it carefully. In the following days, Clara began to take on more responsibilities at the ranch. She helped Luke with the animals, tended the garden, and even began learning small repairs around the house. Each task brought a sense of accomplishment, and she noticed her confidence growing. Sam became braver as well, exploring the fields and playing with the animals, laughing in a way that made Clara's heart soar. She realized that the ranch was not just a home. It was a place where they could grow, heal, and rediscover the joys of life that had been stolen by hardship. One afternoon, Luke invited Clara to sit with him on the porch, overlooking the fields. "You've done well," he said quietly. "Not just with chores, but with Sam and with yourself. You've faced hardships that would have crushed many people, yet here you are, standing strong." Clara looked at him, unsure what to say. I didn't do it alone," she said softly. "Sam keeps me going. And you've helped too, more than you know." Luke nodded, his eyes calm and steady. "I'm glad to help," he said. "But the courage, the strength, that's all yours. I just offered a hand when you needed it." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She realized in that moment that strength could be quiet, unassuming, and patient. It could be about carrying burdens, protecting loved ones, and accepting kindness when it was offered. She understood that trust, once earned, could open doors to a life she had never imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from fear and hunger to hope and safety had been difficult, but she had taken it step by step, guided by courage and quiet kindness. She knew that the days ahead would bring new challenges, but for the first time she felt ready. With Luke's steady presence, Sam's laughter, and the warm embrace of the ranch, Clara began to believe in the possibility of a brighter future. And so, life at the ranch continued, each day building on the last. Clara learned that trust and patience were as important as hard work, and that kindness, once offered, could transform lives in ways unimaginable. She felt herself changing, growing stronger, more confident, and more hopeful. She realized that the world was not always harsh, and that sometimes people like Luke existed. Quiet heroes who offered safety, respect, and the chance to rebuild a life that had been broken by circumstance. The days on the ranch had grown routine, but the calm was only the surface. Beneath it, Clara felt a quiet tension building, a mixture of fear, hope, and the uncertainty of trusting someone completely. She had learned to take care of Sam and herself through hardship, but this new life, with its warmth and safety, was unfamiliar. She found herself wondering whether such kindness could last, or if one day the world would pull it away from her as it had so many times before. One crisp morning, Luke asked Clara to help with a task that felt different from her usual chores. They were going to the far end of the ranch to check on a small herd of cows that had been giving trouble. A week of unusual weather had made the ground slippery and the paths treacherous. Clara felt a flutter of anxiety, not because she lacked the skills. Luke had taught her enough to handle basic ranch work, but because this task would take them far from the safety of the main house. Sam would remain behind, and she felt a pang of worry for him, even though he was in good hands. Luke noticed her hesitation. "It's all right to feel nervous," he said gently. "But you can do this. I'll be with you every step of the way." His calm confidence was reassuring, and Clara realized she trusted him more than anyone she had ever known. She nodded and took a deep breath, steadying herself. The journey to the herd was quiet at first. The wind swept across the plains, rustling the dry grass and carrying the smell of earth and animals. Clara focused on her footing, moving carefully over the uneven ground. Luke rode slightly ahead, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was safe. There was a rhythm to the work, a careful balance of attention and action. Clara felt her heart settle, and for a moment she allowed herself to enjoy the beauty of the open plains, the endless sky, the golden fields, and the sense of freedom that came with wide spaces. When they reached the herd, it was clear that some of the cows were agitated. A few had wandered too close to a small stream, and the slippery banks made it dangerous to approach. Clara's stomach tightened as she realized how delicate the task would be. She watched Luke carefully maneuver the horse, guiding the animals back to safer ground. "Stay calm," he advised. "They can sense fear. Speak gently and move slowly." Clara followed his instructions, her hands trembling slightly as she guided one cow back to the herd. Step by step, the process became easier, and she began to feel a quiet pride in her ability to manage the animals. Just as they thought the herd was secure, a sudden noise startled the cows. A gust of wind had knocked a branch against a fence post, and the sound echoed across the field. Several cows bolted in different directions, and Clara felt a surge of panic. She tried to corral them, but one stubborn cow charged toward the stream, slipping dangerously close to the edge. Clara froze, her heart racing. Luke was instantly at her side. "Move slowly, Clara. Don't panic," he said firmly, his hand steady on her shoulder. Together they approached the cow, speaking softly to calm it. Clara's hands were shaking, but she focused on Luke's calm presence. Step by step, they guided the animal back to solid ground. When it was safe, Clara exhaled in relief, feeling the adrenaline leave her body in waves. Luke smiled at her, a quiet approval in his eyes. "You did well," he said. "You stayed calm when it mattered most." Clara felt a mixture of pride and amazement. She had faced many challenges before, but never like this, where her courage, skill, and trust in someone else mattered so deeply. She realized that life on the ranch was teaching her more than chores and animal care. It was teaching her patience, resilience, and the quiet power of working together. As they walked back to the main house, Luke spoke about life on the plains, about the storms, the long days, and the people who had helped him along the way. Clara listened, captivated, and felt a growing admiration for his strength and wisdom. She noticed how careful he was, not just with the animals, but with her and Sam. He never treated them as fragile or incapable. Instead, he treated them with respect, allowing them to grow and learn while offering support when needed. That evening, after the herd was settled and the chores were done, Clara prepared dinner with a renewed sense of confidence. Sam helped where he could, carrying firewood and setting the table. The warmth of the hearth and the smell of fresh bread created a sense of comfort Clara had almost forgotten. Luke joined them at the table, and they shared a quiet meal, the conversation flowing easily. For Clara, it was a moment of pure contentment, simple, unassuming, but full of meaning. Later that night, as Clara tucked Sam into bed, she reflected on the day's events. The storm of panic in the field had reminded her that life could still be unpredictable, even in a place of safety. But it also reminded her of something more important. She was not alone. She had Luke by her side, offering steady guidance and unwavering support. She had Sam, whose laughter and trust gave her purpose. And she had herself, strong, capable and growing with each passing day. The next morning brought another challenge. A neighboring rancher arrived at Luke's gate, seeking assistance. One of his horses had gone missing and he needed help tracking it across the plains. Luke asked Clara if she wanted to join him. Her heart raced at the thought, but she nodded. The thought of venturing beyond the safety of the ranch was daunting. Yet she also felt a thrill of excitement. She was learning to face challenges head-on, and this was another opportunity to test her courage. They rode together across the wide fields, following the tracks of the missing horse. Clara marveled at the endless horizon, the way the light shifted across the plains, and the sound of the wind through the grass. Luke rode beside her, offering encouragement and instruction, guiding her hands on the reins and her eyes on the trail. Step by step, they tracked the horse, and Clara felt a growing sense of accomplishment. She realized that fear could be managed, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. When they finally found the missing horse near a small grove of trees, Clara's heart lifted with relief. She helped guide the horse back to the neighboring ranch, her hands steady and her confidence growing with each step. Luke's quiet pride in her was evident, though he never made a show of it. Instead, he offered gentle praise, letting her feel the satisfaction of her own success. Clara realized that this was different from anything she had known before. Here she was seen, not as someone who struggled, but as someone who could contribute, who could make a difference, and who deserved respect. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was low in the sky, painting the plains in golden light. Clara felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and responsibility, and she had come through stronger on the other side. She looked at Luke, who smiled quietly, understanding her unspoken thoughts. She realized that his presence had not only guided her but also given her the courage to trust herself. That night, as they sat by the fire, Luke and Clara spoke quietly about the day. Sam was already asleep, his small form rising and falling with gentle breaths. "You did well today," Luke said, his voice steady. "Not just with the horse, but with everything. You stayed calm, worked carefully, and faced challenges bravely. You're stronger than you realize." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet pride she had not known before. She realized that life on the ranch was not just about survival. It was about growth, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from facing challenges with courage and support. She thought of the days before, of hunger, rejection, and loneliness, and she felt a deep gratitude for the path that had led her here. As the fire crackled and the stars began to shine outside, Clara reflected on the changes she had experienced. She was no longer the girl who had been turned away at the store, clutching a few coins in fear and shame. She was a young woman capable of facing uncertainty, of working with skill and patience, and of trusting those who had earned it. The bond with Luke had grown, quiet but strong, and she felt a sense of belonging she had never known. And yet, despite the triumphs, Clara knew that life would continue to bring challenges. The plains were beautiful but unpredictable, and hardship could return at any time. But for the first time, she felt ready, not just to survive, but to thrive. She had learned that kindness could change a life, that trust could open doors to new possibilities, and that courage came in many forms, both quiet and bold. Clara closed her eyes that night, feeling the warmth of the fire and the safety of the ranch. She thought of Sam sleeping peacefully, of Luke's steady presence, and of the wide open plains stretching endlessly beyond the cabin. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, support, and courage to face them. And in that quiet moment, she allowed herself to feel a deep sense of hope, a belief that life could be more than mere survival. It could be filled with safety, respect, and the quiet joy of being truly seen and valued. The following days on the ranch passed with a gentle rhythm that Clara had never known before. Mornings began with the soft light of dawn spilling across the plains, and evenings ended with the warm glow of the hearth and the quiet murmur of the wind through the fields. Life was not without work, but the tasks now carried a sense of purpose and accomplishment that Clara had never experienced in her years of struggle. She had learned to care for the animals, the garden, and the home with skill and confidence, and each small success brought a quiet pride that she held close to her heart. Sam thrived in this new environment. He ran through the fields without fear, played with the animals, and laughed freely, filling the ranch with a light and joy that Clara had almost forgotten. Watching him, Clara felt a warmth unlike any she had known. She realized that her own happiness was deeply connected to his, and she found herself savoring the simple moments, the sound of his laughter, the gleam of excitement in his eyes, the way he ran to greet the chickens in the morning. Luke continued to be a steady presence in their lives. He never rushed them, never imposed himself, but he was always there when they needed guidance, support, or simply companionship. Clara had come to trust him deeply, not just because he had offered them food and shelter, but because he had treated her and Sam with respect, kindness, and patience. He had given her a sense of safety she had never felt before, and in doing so he had opened the door for her to hope again. One afternoon, as Clara tended the vegetable garden, Luke approached with a quiet smile. "I thought you might like to take a break," he said, offering a cup of warm tea. She accepted gratefully, sitting on the edge of the small wooden fence that bordered the garden. The sun was warm on her face, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh soil and growing plants. She realized how much she had come to appreciate these quiet moments, moments of calm, of beauty, and of connection with the land and the people around her. "I never imagined life could be like this," Clara admitted softly. "I thought we would always struggle, that Sam and I would have to fight just to survive each day. But now, it feels like there's room for more than just survival. There's room for hope." Luke nodded, his eyes steady and kind. "Hope is important," he said. "But you've earned it, Clara. You've worked hard, faced challenges, and shown courage every day. You deserve this life." Clara felt a swell of gratitude, mixed with a quiet sense of wonder. For so long she had been overlooked, judged, or dismissed. Yet here was someone who saw her strength, her courage, and her worth. She realized that hope was not just about wishes or dreams. It was about being recognized, respected, and given the chance to grow. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Luke's bond deepened. They worked side by side in the fields, shared quiet meals, and spent evenings talking by the fire. Their relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, not haste or expectation. Clara found herself confiding in him about her fears, her past struggles, and her hopes for the future. Luke listened patiently, offering gentle advice and quiet encouragement. For the first time, Clara felt that she could be herself without fear of judgment, and she realized how rare and precious that feeling was. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in a warm golden light, Luke approached Clara with a small smile. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, leading her toward the barn. Inside, he had set up a small table with a simple meal, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, and a few small treats. Sam's eyes widened with delight, and he ran to help set the plates. Clara felt a deep sense of warmth and gratitude. She realized that this was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of care, thoughtfulness, and the life they had built together. Luke joined them at the table, and they ate quietly, enjoying the food, the company, and the simple pleasure of being together. Clara felt a quiet joy she had never experienced before, a sense of belonging that filled her heart. After the meal, Luke spoke gently. "Clara, I've watched you grow stronger every day. You've faced challenges with courage, cared for Sam with love, and learned to trust again. I'm proud of you." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You've given us safety, guidance, and a chance to live, not just survive. I don't know how to thank you." Luke shook his head, smiling. "You don't need to thank me. Seeing you and Sam happy and safe is thanks enough. But I want you to remember this. Strength, courage, and hope are already inside you. I just helped you see it." Clara felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that her journey, from hunger, fear, and rejection to safety, trust, and hope, had taught her more than she could have imagined. She had learned the value of kindness, the power of trust, and the importance of believing in oneself. And she had learned that even in the harshest of circumstances, life could hold beauty, joy, and unexpected blessings. The following days brought more small joys. Clara taught Sam to care for the animals alongside her, showing him how to gather eggs, feed the chickens, and tend the garden. Luke occasionally joined them, guiding their efforts without taking control. Clara found herself laughing more freely, enjoying the work and savoring the simple moments that made life meaningful. She realized that happiness was not about luxury or wealth. It was about safety, love, and the ability to grow. One crisp morning, as Clara worked in the garden, she noticed the first signs of spring. Tiny green shoots peeked through the soil, promising new life and new beginnings. She thought of their journey, from the cold, harsh streets of the town to the warm, welcoming ranch, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had not been easy, but they had survived, grown stronger, and found hope. And now, with the promise of new beginnings in the fields around her, Clara felt ready for whatever the future might bring. That evening, as they all sat by the fire, Luke spoke quietly. "Clara, you've taught me as much as I've taught you. Your courage, care, and love for Sam have been inspiring. I'm glad you and Sam are here, part of this life." Clara looked at him, her heart full. "I never imagined that someone could show such kindness," she said softly. "But you did. You changed our lives." Luke smiled. "No, one can change a life alone. You've worked hard, stayed strong, and never gave up. I just offered a helping hand when you needed it." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude and joy. She realized that life was no longer about struggling through each day. It was about living, loving, and embracing the opportunities that came with kindness and trust. In the following weeks, Clara began to dream again. She imagined a future where Sam could grow up without fear, where she could continue to learn, grow, and contribute to the ranch. She imagined a life filled with laughter, hard work, and the quiet joy of simple moments. And she realized that this life, once unimaginable, was now within reach. Luke and Clara's bond grew stronger, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared experience. They worked together, laughed together, and faced challenges side by side. Clara knew that life would continue to bring difficulties, but she felt ready. She had found a home, a sense of belonging, and people who cared deeply for her and Sam. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that happiness, safety, and love were not just dreams. They were possible. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara stood outside with Sam by her side. She looked at the vast fields, the sturdy barn, and the warm light spilling from the cabin. She felt a deep sense of peace, a knowledge that they had come far, and a quiet hope for the days to come. Luke joined them, standing quietly as the wind brushed through their hair. Clara realized that life on the ranch had given them more than safety. It had given them a sense of purpose, a place to belong, and the freedom to grow. She knew that the journey had been difficult, but she also knew that the lessons, love, and kindness they had received would guide them for the rest of their lives. As night fell, Clara tucked Sam into bed, kissed him softly on the forehead, and whispered words of hope and love. She stepped outside to stand beside Luke, looking up at the stars twinkling over the plains. She felt a quiet gratitude for the journey they had taken together, for the kindness that had changed their lives, and for the strength that had carried them through. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt completely at peace. She had survived hardship, embraced kindness, grown in strength, and found hope. And as she stood there, hand in hand with Luke, she knew that the days ahead would be filled with safety, love, and the quiet joy of a life rebuilt on trust, courage, and compassion. The plains stretched endlessly before them, wide and open, just as life now seemed to stretch before Clara. With Sam's laughter in the distance and Luke's steady presence by her side, she allowed herself to dream freely, to hope, and to believe that the world could indeed be a place of warmth, kindness, and new beginnings. And in that quiet, starlit moment, Clara realized that their journey, from struggle and fear to safety, trust, and love, was only the beginning. Together they would face whatever came next, with courage, hope, and the knowledge that kindness could truly change a life.